The winter sun was sinking behind the skyline of Manhattan, its fading light spilling across streets still buzzing with life. A cold wind carried the scent of roasted chestnuts, car exhaust, and something bittersweet, loneliness. On the corner of Fifth Avenue, near a small bakery that glowed like a beacon of warmth, a frail girl in a tattered coat stood shivering. Her fingers, red and raw from the cold, clutched a torn paper bag. Her name was Mira, and she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her lips trembled as she approached the counter window, her voice barely louder than the hum of passing cars. "Do you have any expired cake?" she whispered, her eyes pleading not for luxury, but for survival. If this story already stirs your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light, because kindness and second chances can truly change lives. Inside the bakery, people came and went, laughing and chatting, their arms full of pastries and hot chocolate. No one noticed Mira, except for a young cashier who frowned and muttered something about troublemakers. Just as Mira turned to leave, her head spinning from hunger, a sleek black car pulled up across the street. The door opened, and out stepped Adrian Valen, one of the city's most powerful billionaires, a man whose name appeared in business magazines and charity galas, yet whose eyes had long forgotten what compassion looked like. Adrian was on his way to a meeting, his phone glued to his ear, his voice sharp with impatience. "No excuses. I want those figures on my desk by 8. He snapped, striding toward the cafe next door. But something made him stop. A sound, soft and trembling, carried by the wind. He turned and saw her, a small girl, clutching a bag like it was her last hope. Her words reached him again, faint yet clear. "Do you have any expired cake?" For reasons he couldn't explain, Adrian froze. Maybe it was the way her voice cracked, or the way her eyes, wide and innocent yet so tired, seemed to hold years of pain. The world around him blurred, the city noise fading into silence. In that single moment he saw not a homeless girl, but a mirror of everything he'd lost: kindness, humility, and a beating human heart. He watched as the cashier shook her head dismissively and turned away. Mira lowered her gaze, whispered a thank you no one heard, and began to walk off into the cold. Without thinking, Adrian called out, "Wait." His voice startled her. She turned, startled and cautious, as if expecting to be scolded. Instead, he approached slowly, his expression softening. "What did you ask for?" he said gently. Her answer came hesitantly. "Just expired cake, sir, the kind you throw away." She smiled faintly, as if to reassure him she wasn't dangerous. That smile, fragile, trembling, but filled with dignity, cut through Adrian's guarded soul like light through darkness. He led her back into the bakery and told the cashier, "Pack her whatever she wants, fresh." The young man blinked in surprise, then obeyed. Mira's eyes widened as boxes of pastries were handed to her. Too much food for one meal, more kindness than she'd seen in months. "I can't pay for this," she whispered. "You already have," Adrian said softly. "With your courage." That night, Adrian couldn't sleep. He had everything: wealth, status, power. But Mira's voice kept echoing in his mind. Expired cake. He thought about the irony. She was willing to eat what others discarded, while he threw away banquets untouched. For the first time in years, Adrian felt something stir inside, a hunger not for success but for meaning. The next day he went looking for her. He found her near an old church, huddled with a few other homeless souls around a burning barrel. She looked surprised to see him again. "You came back?" she asked, her voice fragile as glass. "Yes," he said, "because I owe you more than you know." Over the following weeks, Adrian visited her often. He brought food, blankets, and most importantly, conversation. He learned that Mira had once been a student studying art before tragedy struck. Her mother died suddenly, and the bills piled up. She lost her home, then her job, and finally her hope. Yet through it all, she never begged for money, only for what was thrown away. I didn't want pity, she once told him, just a chance to survive another day. Those words hit Adrian harder than any business loss. He realized how blind he'd been, how detached from the world beyond his glass towers. Slowly, his visits became less about charity and more about friendship. He began to see her not as a beggar, but as a teacher, someone who reminded him what humanity meant. Then one snowy afternoon, tragedy struck. Mira fell ill. The cold she'd ignored for weeks turned into pneumonia. Adrian rushed her to the hospital, using every connection he had to get her treated. For days, he stayed by her side, watching her fight for her life. "You saved me once," she whispered weakly. "Now let me save you too." Adrian frowned, not understanding. She smiled faintly. "You were lost before you found me, weren't you?" Tears burned in his eyes. She was right. His empire had been built on numbers and contracts, but it had no soul. She, a girl with nothing, had given him everything he'd forgotten: compassion, purpose, and a reason to care again. When Mira finally recovered, Adrian made a decision that shocked the world. He launched a foundation called The Second Slice, dedicated to feeding the homeless with leftover food from restaurants and bakeries across the city. "No one," he said at the opening ceremony, "should ever have to beg for expired cake." Mira stood beside him that day, dressed not in rags but in simple, elegant clothes he'd bought her. Yet her proud, humble smile was the same. She helped him design the program, using her experience to guide every detail. People need dignity as much as they need bread, she reminded him. Her words became the foundation's motto. Months passed, and the movement grew nationwide. Stories of kindness began spreading, bakers donating unsold goods, children volunteering, strangers sharing meals under bridges. Every time Adrian saw a new center open, he thought of the freezing girl outside the bakery, and how one question had changed his life forever. But perhaps the most beautiful moment came a year later, on the anniversary of their meeting. Adrian stood outside the same bakery, now painted with the foundation's logo. The street was bustling, filled with volunteers handing out food. Mira approached him, carrying a small cake box. "It's fresh," she said with a wink, "not expired." He laughed softly, but his eyes glistened. "You've come a long way, Mira." She nodded, then looked toward the crowd. "No, we have." As the sun dipped low again, Adrian realized something profound. Sometimes the people who have the least to give end up giving the most. Sometimes one act of kindness is enough to heal 1,000 broken hearts, including your own. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Soul of Light, because every view, every comment, every gesture of kindness helps remind the world that compassion still matters. And before you scroll away, here's a special request. Comment below "Kindness never expires" if you believe that one small act can change someone's world forever, because sometimes all it takes is one question. And one heart willing to listen.